Hey everybody, Michael LeJeune here with Game Changers for Government Contractors. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice I'm in a mobile studio this week. We're going to be doing more of that. We're at conferences and other different places and just kind of recording out in the wild, if you will, doing something a little bit different. But today I have a great guest on here. Mary is going to be talking to us about all the success that their business has had and kind of giving us some pointers of what's made their company successful. But before we jump in and talk, Mary, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? Tell them a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what your company does, and then maybe you can kind of give us a little intro into what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Mary Toxey, and I am the COO of Basis Path. We're a small women veteran-owned company. There's three owners, myself, Sarah Absher, and Joe Ponzak. And Sarah and I are the women veteran-owned component of the company. And our main focus areas and capabilities that we provide have to do with modernization efforts and data science. And so when I say modernization efforts, we're usually asked to come on to contract or program or various agencies to assist our clients and customers in modernizing their infrastructure and also their processes. And so on the modernization side, we focus on moving folks from on-prem to cloud, automating all of their build processes. So we do focus on CI/CD pipelines, DevSecOps. And then from a process standpoint, we're agile experts. And so we will bring all the agile processes in. And part of doing that, where what we're really good at is convincing the customer, the client, and the people that we're working with that this change is good. It might be a little bit upfront heavy lift, but it's going to pay off in the end. And then kind of like working with them hand in hand through that process so that it's successfully implemented. And then on the data science front, we specialize in ontology. And then also we specialize in data engineering. And then that data science effort then ties down to something called targeting. And then, really quick, something that I think is very unique about our company is that while we're a small business, we do support five different intelligence community agencies. And then we also support some DoD components and then the DEA under DOJ. And so, what that allows us to do is a lot of experience, but also
Yeah.
we can offer a lot of flexibility in opportunities and things like that for for the folks that work for us and then for the folks that we want to recruit. So
Yeah.
that's it, super super quick, hopefully
Yeah.
not too much
No,
information.
that's awesome. I mean, I could probably listen to you talk for an hour about all that stuff. When I first got into government contracting, I was with a big company that sold us off to a smaller company that sold us off to an even smaller company. And when we got in the really small company, we were working with the intelligence agencies and
Mhm.
DoD and other folks. And I feel like as you were telling that, I'm like, that feels like my story when back in the day, because we got so much experience across so many different organizations, man. It just made us such a great company. And it made me a great, to me, not sound like I'm bragging anyway. It made me, in my opinion, like a great leader in that respect because we got to see so many different things, and you just don't get to do that when you're
Right.
young. And so that was really great to see all that. So I'm listening to you. And I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's really good. And for those that don't, um, it's just. I'm sure you're going to have a great story here today as we get in there. But before I get into your story on the company side, you talked about being a veteran. So what branch?
Air Force.
Air Force. Won't hold that
Mhm.
against you. I'm an Army guy. If I could do it all over again, I totally would have gone Air Force. I didn't even know that was an option. So,
I mean,
uh,
Smart Force.
yeah, the Smart Force, and I realized that very quickly when you show up and they have all their stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh, this would have been a great option. I actually accidentally joined the Army. I went
Mhm.
in because my friend was trying to recruit me to the Navy, and they weren't there that day, and the Army guy
Yeah,
was, and he
let's
just
say
picked
not
me up, and
accidentally.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome! I'm so glad I did that. But so what did you do in the Air Force?
I was a SIGINT intelligence analyst.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's my MOS for
Oh,
Army.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we hadn't talked
I
about that, but yeah,
I have a little joke about that. So God, I hope I don't offend people. So,
it's okay
you
if you
know,
do. They'll be
we
fine.
have like in the intel world, you work with other different, ints, right?
Yep.
And different components of it. And so I always said, and back when I was in, Morse code operators were a thing. They were still
Really?
there. Okay. So So I was always like, the Morse code operators are the blue collar folks of the intelligence,
Yeah.
and then of the intelligence community. And then your linguists,
Yeah.
they're
Those-
definitely your quirkies. They're like your Dungeons and Dragons. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
You're 100% spot on so
And
far.
then the imagery analysts, they're in their little caves. They're in their little caves and they have their little,
Yeah.
gadgets and just don't turn on the lights. And then I always thought us SIGINTers, we were kind of like, we were smart, but not so smart where we're awkward, right? And
Yeah.
so we can really interact with people. We kind of like we're the glue, is what I always felt like
Yeah.
on the ops floor. And so whenever I meet another SIGINT or ex SIGINTer, I always kind of have that like,
Yeah.
you're smart, but not too smart.
Not too smart. Not too smart that it's too good. Yeah. It was fun. So I went through my MOS in 95 is when I went through. And I feel like we were one of the last waves of people even being trained in that because
Mhm,
it went from us using pen and paper to break codes. Cryptography is one of the
mhm.
biggest things, right? And to they're using computers. So I get to Fort Hood and we're not even doing that. They're like, oh, you're going to be just an Intel analyst instead of a
Just an
SIGINT
intel.
analyst. Yeah. I'm like, well, come on, yeah. What am I going to do with that? Now you're
What
going
do
to
we do
dumb
with
me
all that
down.
math?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're going to dumb me down. But anyway, so just to pick on the Intel analyst, but
Yeah.
no, that's a great job. So I try to ask this more and more these days. So when you were a little kid, did you want to grow up, be in the Air Force, and then start your own company that does what you do, or did you want to be like an astronaut? Like, what was your thing? How did we get here?
Oh gosh. So when I grew up, very poor, just very poor, and very, very, very humble beginnings. So honestly, like I'm not lying when I say when I was growing up, high school, and even when I joined the military, I had no clue. My whole objective was just to feed myself and to pay the bills.
Yeah, you're telling my
Whatever that,
story, so
whatever that looked like, I was open to. And I
yeah,
knew that for me, coming from a very rural area, not a lot of opportunities, um, the military was a way to potentially get my
yeah,
education. So actually, when I joined, I came in open general. I was like, whatever, doesn't matter. I don't care where you put me. I honestly just want to try to get an education and just do something better than where I'm at.
yep,
So I went in open general and they picked me for SIGINT. I had no clue. I remember thinking like, what is this? I swear, even when I was in tech school, I was like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be here. Like,
right,
I don't even know what this is. So I kind of stumbled upon it. And, the military offered me so many great opportunities and actually shine a light on what I potential that I don't know that I was
you didn't know.
identified prior to
You
that.
didn't know you
Right.
had that, right?
Right. And then when I got out of the military, I'm looking for a job, and I applied to a million positions, didn't know what I was applying for really. And then I got an opportunity with Lockheed Martin. And that was my first introduction into like strictly IT, information technology.
Hmm.
And I was very actually kind of like scared of it at first. And I thought, I don't know if this is something, but I needed a job. So I took the job and I was on this giant DoD program. So I'm very grateful for that because they don't have those anymore, really. They're such
Yeah,
small contracts, it's very rare. And I learned so much and I found that I absolutely loved it. And so I honestly kind of stumbled upon each chapter, and then, as far as, okay, how do you go from working for Lockheed Martin to then kind of like owning your own business? So the sequestration stuff happened. So anybody that can remember that, that's when they did that big, huge, budget cut just across the entire DoD. And so the Lockheed Martins and and these big companies, they did drastic cost reductions, and there were, promotions were frozen, and it just changed the kind of culture
hmm,
and atmosphere. And so it was kind of like, I'm kind of stuck. I'm not going to go anywhere. I didn't feel that there was any upward movement. So my business partner, who's actually also my sister,
oh,
Sarah,
nice.
she's like, hey, why don't we try to go work for a small company? And I was like, okay, let's do it. So we went and worked for a small company, and then that's where I met our third business partner, Joe. And that wasn't a great experience. I'm not gonna lie. And we can get into that later. But and where I'll kind of talk about where I think we're a differentiator, but it's because of this experience. So we worked there for about maybe 9 months, and then we all got together and we said, this didn't totally turn out the way that we wanted it. So what could we do differently? And then we just said, hey, why don't we just try to start our own company? Let's start our own company. We've learned so much. We have diverse backgrounds. So our third business partner, Joe, came from the commercial sector. He's a developer by trade. So we had a really, diverse background amongst the three of us, an interesting network. And we thought, you know what? It's literally, if it doesn't work out, we'll go back to our old
Yeah.
jobs and it'll be okay. And that's how we started the company.
That's a great way to get started. And, as you're telling your story, there's so many aspects that are similar to mine. And so I know I'm going to have some questions that may sound off the wall, but
Mhm.
it relates to me. I mean, where did you grow up? You said a small town,
Uh, Danville, Virginia, like
Danville, Virginia.
rural Southern
Okay.
Virginia, right on the
Okay.
border of North Carolina.
Nice. Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah. I think there's something about the small town work ethic and the military and working for a DoD contractor. It's just a special blend of people
Mhm.
that I've definitely seen for sure. So tell me a little bit about kind of what drives your business today.
So I think joy of the work, right? So, and I say that and I really mean it because I work with a lot of different companies, work with a lot of different people. And while obviously the monetary aspect is a driver, it is obviously that's for everybody, right? We have families that we want to take care of, we have dreams, and we have, retirement and the lifestyle that we want to live in. That's all part of it. But I think what is core and central and most important to definitely the three owners and then Basis Path in general, hopefully our culture is that we don't just go after anything. We're okay if we don't have 100 people working for us. That
Hmm.
isn't like when we're setting our goals. It's not like, oh, okay, we need to be 100 people, 200. So we really love what we're doing. So we're like, we'll be picky about the work that we go after. And we want to make sure that we're good at what it is that we're saying we're going to do. And then all the way down to when we're asking people to come work for us or we're recruiting folks. There's a whole process of like, hey, do you really like this work? What do you enjoy about it? And then we want to get to know where their strengths and things like that. And then we take our time in placing them in specific positions because we want them to enjoy it because then they're going to do well if they enjoy it. And so there's been plenty of times where, we've said no to candidates or maybe it didn't work out or took maybe a little bit longer than maybe even the candidate like to find a position, but it's because we're trying to make that match.
Right.
And because enjoying your work is really, really important to us. Not just for me, like every day I want to enjoy my job, but I want all of my employees to enjoy their job.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that that's really, and so our little tagline is mission over margins, but we absolutely mean that.
I love that. That's a great
Yeah.
tagline. Mission over
Mhm.
margins. That's a good one.
Mhm.
That somebody's going to highlight that when they're reading the transcript on this one. So, um,
Yeah.
so when did you start your company?
Well, we incorporated in 2014.
Okay.
So really, really got off the ground. So I always tell folks because one of the things that we also do, we also help is we help other people start small businesses. We've even had a couple of our employees who came on board and said, "Hey, my end goal is to start my own company." We're like, "Great, we will help you." And so we've done that. So one of the things that I tell folks when they're getting started and everything like that is to make sure that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You're good.
What was the question?
Well, I'd ask just simply about like when you started the company. And so I think
Oh,
maybe,
got it. Yep.
yeah.
Okay. So the very first thing is get yourself a job, right?
Mm,
So you don't, most people don't start off just, okay, I'm on overhead. I'm going to go run a company and then I'm going to go get contracts and then I'm going to go hire people, right? So the first step is convincing a prime or a customer to bring you on as your
mhm,
own company. So that's step number one. And so then once you do that, which usually is pretty fairly easy, I mean, it is because you've gained a reputation. Then that next step is okay, now I need to get a contract. And then that's when you start hiring people. And then that's when you start building your reputation. And so we really did we got ourselves on contract in 2014, but our first real contract where we started hiring employees and everything was in 2015.
Nice, nice. So been doing this a decade. Where are you at today? Because I want people to jump into this and hear like where the success is. So today, whether it's revenue, employees, what are the metrics that you are most proud of today with the company? I know it's, you know, the what? How did you say? What was the quote again about over margins? Say it again.
Oh, mission over
Mission
margins.
over margins. But so where are you today growth wise?
So, like I said, we do support multiple agencies, and also we support the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is under DOJ. Um, and we have, a good strong number amount of employees. So we fluctuate usually between
Mhm.
55 and 60 at this point. Um,
That's a lot
and
of
that's
employees.
and it's a good,
Yeah.
it's a comfort zone. We do have a combination of traditional W-2s and 1099s. The 1099s is specifically for the DEA work because it's incredibly specific and niche
Mhm.
capabilities. Um, and then I would say where I think that we're most proud and is that we have really established what our capability is. So
Mm.
we are asked to come to do work. We don't have to go necessarily seek it out. Obviously, we are seeking it out because you want to look for work that's going to be cool and fun
Yeah.
and fits your capabilities. So there's that aspect of us looking for work. But we're at a point now where we're being asked, even, at the agency level, to come in to do specific work. And one of the things that we've been doing recently is trying to find a good prime partner that aligns with some of the work that we're doing. Um, and one of the things that I'm saying with confidence and also absolute truth is that I know that we're a small company, but we're an absolute emerging leader in the data science field, specifically within the intelligence community. And so I think from a reputation standpoint, while small and not everybody's heard of us, but people who have heard of us know that we have a strong reputation. And so
Mhm.
I really believe that, that's where I'm kind of saying like, oh, we're really successful, because we're not having to go and say, oh, hi, I'm a women veteran owned company. I'll help you meet your quota.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. And
Yeah.
so I'm really proud of that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that listen to the show that are not even incorporated yet, and they're trying to make the leap into this. And then we
Hmm.
have a lot of people in that they're the only employee, maybe they're an army of one or two or
Hmm.
three that would love to be in a position where they have 50, 60 employees. So I think there's a lot of knowledge there of even just how you're making those leaps. And, there's a lot of different tiers when you're growing of different problems you have and things like that. What do you feel is something that's distinct that sets your business apart? I mean, it sounds like part of it is your brand and your mission over margins concept there.
Hmm.
But are there some other things that really make you feel like this is what sets us apart in the industry?
Well, so from my experience with small companies, even large companies,
Mm-hmm.
um, when we say we're going to deliver, we actually deliver, right? And
Mm,
so we're not just kind of talk. We're not going to, chat GPT our proposal. Just, I have to throw that in there.
yeah.
But what, and what we're saying that we're going to bring to the table, we actually mean it. And that even means upon execution. So if we say that we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to bring this certain skill set, we're going to bring this talent, that also means that we have to follow up. So even if that means, hey, I've identified an employee or I've identified an area where we're not doing so well, then we will take action. We don't need someone to tell us to do that. We're monitoring that. We have a really good pulse on our employees, where they're at, how their performance is, their development, their training, which we put an enormous emphasis on. And so um, it isn't. We're not going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go put personnel on this contract and they have this skill set and then walk away, right? If they're either going to perform or they're no longer going to be on that contract. And
Mm,
so that is a known thing when you come to work for Basis Path, right? And so and it's part of the interview process to kind of flush out, the kind of person, which I'm saying is perfectly okay, but just not for Basis Path. It's perfectly okay if you just want to kind of come in and, check in and check out and do your job. And that's great. That is great. I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. It's just that from a Basis Path standpoint, we're emphasizing, performance, excellence. I want to throw that word out. Um, and so again, it's more about quality than it is
Yeah.
quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking back at the last decade, what would you say? Let's get both sides of this coin here. What would you say are maybe the top two or three challenges that you had while you were growing and what you did to overcome them? And I'll preempt what you're going to say by saying for somebody to even survive 3 years in this business is a great testament to a lot of things going on behind the scenes. To do 5 years, it don't see a lot of that, but to do a decade in this market,
Mhm.
you're doing a lot of the right things. Part of it just being persevering, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many right things there. So I'd love to hear, because I know there's somebody out there listening that you're going to share a challenge and they're going to say, I'm having that right now. How did they get through that? So maybe you can give us two or three of what those challenges were to your growth. Maybe even if it's, hey, we were at 15 employees and just couldn't figure out how to get to 30 or whatever,
hmm
and then we did this and that got us there. I think that would be really helpful for people to hear that from you.
Okay, so I know immediately right off the bat, the very first challenge. So it was our first contract, like real contract, where we helped with the proposal. We had key personnel on the contract. It was brand new development. It was like most exciting, right? It was like, oh my God, this is gonna be so great. All right, so the contract gets awarded and we hire and we get, for a small company, I think we had gotten like 10 people hired on in the first year, and it was
Wow.
awesome. Okay. So now here is the thing with contracts, as you will learn, and especially it has a different impact when you're the business owner. Not all contracts perform, great, right? And especially if they're new development and there's like, very challenging milestones that you need to meet, and then you are a sub to the prime, so no matter what, you have to go with what the prime decides. Even if you don't agree with it or you don't think it's the right approach, you still have to go with what the prime. So that very first contract, we were super excited, and after the first year it started declining, so
Mm.
performance wise. And then we're like, oh my God, and for us, it's like we have 10 people. We don't, what are, where else are we going to place people? Like, what are we going to do? And we started seeing the layoffs and we started seeing it downsizing, and we almost went into panic mode. So, one of the things that we learned really early on is you have to diversify. So, even if you have a great relationship with a prime, and you could even have, almost, personal friendships with the people that are the program managers or the directors or whatever, in the end, you still have to be able to have options because the nature of this business. You have difficult customers. There's things that happen that you never know that are going to occur and can impact the performance of the contract. So, very first lesson we learned was diversify. So, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So, even if you only have 5 employees, start looking beyond that, other contracts, other agencies, other places. And so we started having this rule, like, depending on the size of the contract, we're not going to put any more than 5 people on one contract, right?
Mm.
Because once you start, it's too much as a small business to try to shuffle and move people around if something goes awry. And that's happened twice to us,
Mm.
where all of a sudden the contract is ending suddenly, or they didn't get the recompete and it was a sure shot. And I can say that we successfully moved those people to other contracts and didn't lose a single person. So that was like, so we learned that really early on, and that's super important, is to definitely diversify, even though you're a small business, and that should be your focus initially, is to get on multiple contracts. And then the second big one, which hit everybody, was freaking COVID-19. Okay. And then this that was awful. Okay. I and we survived that, but it wasn't the year that everything happened, and we had the PPP and the small business, and we had the CARES Act, and so that protected us. It was after the after effect, which was
Mm.
everybody wanting to work remote. Everybody on
Yeah.
planet Earth wants to work remote, and oh, by the way, I want an enormous salary.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh my God, we work in the intelligence. Like how is this possible? Now I will give it to the government, and I will give it to others that they really did, kind of adjust, and there's a lot more hybrid opportunities. And I am a proponent of flexibility, but that was tough. And so
Yeah.
we had people move, they were moving to Texas, they're moving to Florida. And so it was that was a tough time for us, and we had a downswing. But I think what we learned from it was, okay, how do we sell working in the office as something that's awesome?
Mm.
Okay. How do we make it, and then how do we target people that want to come into the office? Because not everybody wants to constantly
Right.
work remote. So we adjusted with that. And then our culture also. And that's where we really, I think, for us as a company, we kind of shifted to that. Hey, we need to really focus on the actual work that we're doing and the love of that work and the output and what hey, educating people like your work helps do A, B, C, and D for the nation. Like, and not to be shy about saying that, and not to feel like, and to make it cool, right? Because
Mhm.
it's almost, I mean, because honestly, I felt like that there was a kind of like that sense of like, lame, government working in the, you know, working, remote and working in the commercial sector so much better. And so I think doing that adjustment, that was a huge challenge for us.
Yeah. What
Hmm.
what what do you think are like the one or two things that make working in the office appealing? Because I know there's people listening to that struggling right now still. And I'm one of those people, like if I had to go get a job tomorrow, there's just no way. I've been working remotely since 2001. So when COVID happened, I was like, finally, you guys all know what's good out there, right? I'd just
Hmm.
been doing it forever. Even though I'm an Intel
Yeah.
guy, I'd been
Hmm.
working remotely all those years. And, I'd always heard, well, if you're going to have a government business, you got to be in DC. Didn't live in DC,
Hmm.
lived everywhere but DC. And so for me, I'm like, I'm on the other side going, I can make a case all day long for why you can let employees work remote, except for the people that need to be in a skiff for whatever it may be. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you make the workplace appealing, because again, I know there's people listening right now saying, man, I found the perfect employee, but I can't get them to come in the office. Well, how do I do that?
So I think there's always a place for remote work. It isn't that it isn't needed and valuable and something that's really great offering. It's just everyone can't do it.
Right.
And you have to have a good mix. It's a concept, right? So it's no different than like, oh, if I have a team, I need to have a good mix of senior, mid-level, and junior. Okay. Well, it is the exact same concept. I need to have folks that have, can work remote, do work remote, but I need people in the office. There needs to
Mm.
be human interaction. Okay. So yeah, like we can do the virtual, but there was a reason why during COVID, when everybody was locked in their homes, that there was, a mental health crisis. There was a reason why people wanted to get out. So, just from a human aspect, we need to have human interaction. You need to see people face to face. You need to have those opportunities where you have little side conversations that wouldn't happen if I wasn't in the office. There's also something very tangible about sitting at a desk and doing my work and a kind of like focus, a purpose. So like when I'm walking into an office, and this isn't applicable to everyone, but if I have to get up and I have to get ready and I have to drive into the office and I'm in the office and I clock in, for lack of a better word, I am very focused on my job from that time until I leave. And then guess what else? I shut it off when I leave.
Mm.
And so when I go home, I'm at home doing home stuff.
Mm,
So I believe that there are people that can successfully do it, which sounds like you have for a very long time. And then I think that there are people that it actually becomes a detriment in
yeah.
the sense that
We're always
they
working.
can't shut it off. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that I thought was kind of a blessing about being in the intelligence community since I was 19 years old. We can't talk about it at home, right? So it's not like I'm going on and on and on about work. I'm able to shut it off, and I find that as a blessing. And
Yeah.
also, I think it's a huge blessing to put my phone somewhere and then walk in, focus on work, and not be distracted. So I think that there's a ton of benefits to working in the office and the kind of camaraderie and also trust that you build that only I think physical or in-person kind of interactions
Yeah.
can attain. And let's get real, people, unless you turn on that camera, okay, when you're on a meeting, you could be doing 50 other things
Yeah.
and not truly paying attention. And again, I'm not saying one, it's all or nothing, but there just has to be good mix and moderation of it.
No, that
And
makes sense.
so, yeah, and so that's what I try to, and I think it's kind of fun, So I like interacting with people,
Yeah.
and I think if you're a people person, then that's a big sell too.
Yeah, it makes it easy at that point. Now,
Hmm.
I will say, joking back to intelligence people, right? They're not all people, right?
Hmm.
They're maybe just the human people,
Yeah.
those folks, but a lot of them are like, just stick me in a dark cave somewhere, let me do my thing by myself
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
turn in my work, But we're a different kind of people. But so as we kind of wrap up here, like maybe you could tell us what's next for the business. What are maybe some of the principles that have got you here that are going to lead you into this next phase of the business, like some things that set you apart, maybe. But what's next?
So on the business side, we were very comfortable being subs and being partners, felt very comfortable. And we've done a really good job with that. With our work over at the Drug Enforcement Agency, because we were brought in as subject matter experts at the administrator level, which is, at the very top.
Mm-hmm.
We've been able to, get some work that's going to allow us to prime, which is very exciting on the business side of the house. And I think we are now in a position to feel very comfortable where that's going to be from a business for 2025. It's going to be focusing on prime, 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 prime. Now, the reason for that is because it gives you, and, I want to use like a entertainment kind of like term, creative control, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're priming, you form the solution. You are 100% responsible, you know, from beginning to end, the success of whatever it is that you're going after. And so there is a lot of a draw for that and a freedom towards that, right? And so from a business side, we want to focus on that because we have now very well established what we believe our capabilities are. And so now we want to be able to drive that. So we've had all the practice being the subs and partnering and being great partners and helping the prime do that. But so from a business side, we want to focus on the primes so we can have more control in that, control of our destiny, for lack of a better word. Um, and then just from a kind of like people, and hiring and recruiting, again, our company isn't interested in like rapid growth from that perspective, right? We're more interested in bringing on the best of the best. And I don't want to be shy about saying that. We want the best of the best. And what does the best of the best mean? It doesn't mean you have all the accolades in the world. This is definitely something that's different about us. I honestly don't care what college you went to or if you even went to college. I don't care. My most important quality that I am looking for in candidates, an eagerness to learn, an eagerness. Like you have to just really want to learn, okay? And I don't care if you're a junior or a senior, but you really want to learn and you love learning. The second thing is aptitude, obviously, that's important. Um, and then an interest, a genuine interest in what it is that you're doing. I have found more success with those type of people than anybody that has a bunch of accolades on their resume. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I will pick a person that has those qualities, because that usually lends itself to good problem solving skills as well. That over, what has traditionally been like I know you're familiar with labor categories. Must have a
Mhm.
degree and 3 years of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got that. But honestly, and in 15 different certs, I I think that it's more important to find that. And so I'm really excited about building even more that type of company and culture. And then lastly, not to sound corny or anything like that, but also we really, really push wellness that has to do with like your physical and mental health. And so
Nice.
that is an important thing for us. So, time off, breaks. Our company's doing a wellness challenge at the beginning of the year where everybody gets to sign up and have exposure to trainers and training programs, and we're going to have all kinds of rewards for that. And so that's something that we really focus on as well. So really, I'm just really excited about all the opportunities that we're going to go after, but then build in that kind of, like, for lack of a better word, dream
Mhm.
company that anybody or most people would love to work for.
Yeah.
So that's what we're really looking
That's
forward
awesome.
to.
That's all.
Hmm.
I'm gonna ask you one more question here as we
Hmm.
wrap up. Is so you mentioned all the things you're looking for in those employees and like the enthusiasm and all that stuff, and aptitude. How or what process do you use in your screening to identify that? Because I think a lot of people want to do exactly what you're talking about, but struggle to figure out whether it's a tool, a test, interview questions. I've had a handful of clients do kind of like an on the job interview where it's like, you're going to come in for a day, you're going to come in for a week, or we're going to pay you
Hmm.
because we want to see you perform and figure this out. But how do you do it? Because to to build a successful brand where you're being asked to come in,
Hmm.
you're accomplishing those things you're talking about. You're not just
Hmm.
talking about them. You've actually done them. You're accomplishing it. You
Hmm.
sound like you've created a culture that attracts those kind of people. So there's something in your interview process that you're doing different than other people. Without giving away the magic sauce here, is there what are one or two things that you find that help you identify that type of person?
Well, I think so. Obviously, everybody has to go through the normal pre screen type of interview, and it is multiple interviews, which originally I was like, ugh, multiple interviews sounds like crap. But the first two are super easy. And when I say the first two, so the first one is pre screening, no big deal, right? You're just checking off mandatory marks. Are you a US citizen? Stuff like that. Okay. The second interview, which usually is with one of the owners, right? So it really is very conversational. So the number one thing is to put a person at ease so that, and then I've had, especially with some of the juniors, which I just think is awesome, by the way, they'll show up, I can tell that they're very nervous. I've just recently had one where he's like wearing a tie and he's just like, he's got note cards. And I thought, this is not, I'm not here to quiz you on your technical expertise. That will come later, right? So the first thing is to put a person at ease. And then you start talking very conversational about their interests, their life, their background. And you can ascertain so much about a person
Mm-hmm.
when they feel comfortable. Okay. And then you're asking them these types of questions. And then the types of questions they ask you. I'm telling you right now, right away by the types of questions that they're asking what their objective is, what their goal is. I, I promise you, I've seen it. I'll have to say the last three interviews I did was for junior candidates, and there's three totally different types. One, I said the guy that showed up, very nervous. He had a tie on. He had note cards. By the end of that conversation, it was like, yes, 100%. You are going to work for Basis Path. I don't care what I have to do. You are going to work for Basis Path. I could tell that he just loved what he was doing. He'd had this kind of like vast background that led him into the IT field, and it had to do, with biochemical engineering, which was super cool. Okay, so there we go. Then I had another one who was coming from Amazon, apparently making, I don't know, an astronomical amount of money with only 2 years of experience. And I knew immediately as we're talking, like, no, where what she wants isn't a fit for what Basis Path is looking for or what we want. Now, it's fine and dandy that that's what she wants. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we're not a fit.
Not a
I could
fit.
kind of tell, when I was asking about her interests, why she was doing it, how she got into it. Mm-mm,
This wasn't there.
definitely not a fit. And then the third candidate, I'll give you another one. I was into it. I was thinking like this, I think he's going to be somebody for our company. But there was, and I can't, this is like I think it's not tangible, but there was an arrogance and a little bit of an aggression in
Mm,
some of his answers, some of his questions, especially. I think it's key what they ask you. And while it wasn't like immediate, like, I literally had to take a week or 2 weeks to think about it. And then some of his correspondence with our operations manager, email correspondence after that, I honed in on like, no, you know what? I don't think he'll be a good candidate for us. He'll be a great candidate for someone else. I know it, but just not for us.
yeah. Yeah.
So I know I didn't say a lot in that, but I think if you try to make an attempt to get to know the person in the initial interview, you'll get way more than you will from a technical. So then they pass that, then I pass them on to a more technical person to kind of ascertain their technical aptitude, not because I don't want to hire them, but I want to know where to place them
Mm,
so that they can grow or contribute, whichever
right.
wherever they land on the spectrum.
Nice. Nice.
Yep.
No, I think that's really good advice because a lot of people do one interview.
Mm-hmm.
They maybe do some email back and forth, and they do one interview, and they make their decision based on that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really good. Thank you for coming on and talking today. I mean, it sounds like you have built the brand that you have talked about here and described to us, and it'll be interesting to just watch your growth trajectory over the next decade and see where
Yeah.
you are. And
Yeah. I'm really excited.
I love that you're not super focused on we got to get to 1,000 people and all that kind of stuff because to me it's about having fun doing what you love and serving not only the country and the mission but your people too. And so it sounds like you're doing a really good combination of all that, so
Yeah.
thank you for
And
coming on and sharing that with us.
yeah, one last thing. At one point I was very focused on that. I want you to know. And I
Oh.
think the moment we let that go, it just naturally grew.
Hmm.
So I was. I'm not going to say like, okay, that's how we started out. We were very focused on
Yeah.
numbers and number of people, and that didn't work out.
How
So
long did it take you to go from being focused on that to relaxing and letting it go? Because I think that's was it 2 years? Was it 5 years? Was it 7 years? Like
it
how
was
long? It
COVID-19.
was COVID. Yeah, COVID. So,
That
so
was one of
it's
the most stressful times for our company.
yeah.
And it was at that point where it was just like, okay, I'm either gonna like, we have to let this go.
So you're five,
And
six
it
years
was,
in. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was that the whole COVID-19 that, that's when they sent everybody home and was like, we're not gonna pay you. That was a moment of like, what?
What are
And
we gonna
so
do?
yeah.
Mm,
So I think it was a forcing
good.
function of like, yeah. And so that's what did it,
Yeah, that's
honestly.
cool. That's cool.
Mhm.
So who knows what would have happened to people if they didn't have COVID? Because there's been so many good stories like that where there was this really difficult time and it changed their mindset and now they're on this huge growth path. And so that's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you
Yep.
again for coming and talking about this. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
And I think people will get a lot from this episode.
I hope so. And thank you for inviting me.